My plans for what I was going to do in life weren't even close to what God had planned. So he stepped in. And the cool thing is, you can't mess up his plans.
Say that again.
Yeah,
You can't mess up his plans. Read Samson in Judges.
The book, you guys.
That's that book that Denise really likes. You know that book? She says to check it out from the
There's
library.
a lot of good things in there.
Please just hold your breath. Every door looks better when you keep it closed. Keep your head down and don't watch your step. No point in even trying now, just let it go. Maybe they will write the same for me. Maybe this was really just a dream. Don't wanna take that risk and try to see a 9 to 5 open security. I'm sure, but I can guarantee you that's no way to live. Way to live. Promise that's no way to live. Way to live.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Prodigal Peas in a Pod. I'm Denise Acosta.
And I'm Brooke Ackerman.
And we are here today with a special guest, Richele Walker.
Yay!
Thank you for being with us
Oh,
today.
you're quite welcome. Thank you for having me.
Brooke, why don't you give us a little intro?
Yes. If I slip and say Shelley Flo, I just need everybody to understand that I'm still talking about Richele. That's the name that Mike Haynes, hi Mike, that's the name that he and I would call her because part of the way that I know Richele is that she was my former boss. Best boss in the whole world.
All right.
Yes. So if I say Shelley Flo, it's still her. Richele is also a daughter of her earthly parents, but also daughter of the King of Kings.
Amen.
She is a wife, a mom, a friend, a mentor, incredible. Her knowledge of fashion, unbelievable. And I have a story about that, so I'll tell you that too. Am I leaving anything out? Pastor, mentor, just all-around incredible human being. So that's Richele Walker, Shelley Flo, a.k.a. And we're just going to talk to her about her life and who has influenced her and how she's influenced others. And you're going to know so much about Richele by the end of this episode. It's going to be great.
And me too. So exciting. So you have a lot of these different titles that Brooke just mentioned. Mm-hmm. When you think about who you are, what comes to mind?
Oh, the first thing that came to my mind when you said that was redeemed. I don't necessarily think of the different titles that I have as much as I think of the position I have in Christ. I do think it's important that I represent who I am, though, because I am an only girl in my family. The daughter title, sister title, female title was kind of placed on me a lot, but I also think it's important to identify myself as a woman of color, multicultural woman of color, not knowing much about my ethnic background as a little child, but learning about it as I went and learning to embrace it. I thought I was different than a lot of people around me, and I thought that was bad. It took me a while to realize that I was different, and that's the way God likes me. So I kind of had to learn to like myself. So,
yeah, we don't know what that's like at all. That's, nothing in common there.
Never. If someone were to describe you outside of your titles, what would you hope they would say?
Selfless. I feel like it's important that other people see other people the way God created them. Even if those other people do not recognize that they were made in the image of Christ, we need to treat people as if they were. Do I always do that? No. Am I getting better at it? Yes. It's difficult sometimes, especially when you know people are not walking with the Lord. But if you remind yourself how Jesus sees them, the different stories in the Bible of how he restored people who were considered castaways, whatever, it's just important to me that I put that on. A therapist tell me, not that I see a therapist all the time, but there's nothing wrong with that. But she made it a point of saying, she said, that certain things push your buttons. She said, I like it when people push my buttons and they push Jesus out of me. Which I thought that's a really good way to think about things.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about your relationship with Jesus?
Ooh, good golly, Miss Molly.
How did that come?
Ooh, how I cannot count the stars I see, nor can I count your gifts to me. Dear Heavenly Father, these things I know. Your gifts are everywhere I go. This was in a prayer book that my mother gave me when I was about 5 years old, when I first started reading. And I would read this prayer over and over, and look out the window and see stars and think, there's got to be somebody who's in charge of all this stuff. It was at a very early age that I was fascinated that there's a God that knows everybody, knows everything, and was out there somewhere. Probably my grandmother instilled in me a love for going to church, just getting up, going to church on Sunday. And it was a place where I felt extremely comfortable just being in church. Probably did not have the greatest Sunday school teacher. She would tell the same story over and over again. But I love the fact that she loved on us. We felt so loved. It was just a good place to be. And my childhood was very, I don't know how to describe it other than volatile. My father was very violent and an alcoholic, and I thought everybody lived like that. I just thought this was normal. And I remember stepping out of my bedroom and touching the floor in the hallway and just peeking out to make sure it was safe. That was a regular thing. So I did not exactly go the straight and narrow way to Jesus' feet as a young adult. So I accepted Christ at an early age, but it was when I was in college. My roommate was very instrumental in getting me closer to Jesus. She was a little different. I walked in the room and she was sitting on the bed with the Bible open going like this. And I'm like, oh, we got a live one here. And I remember she took me to a church in Meadville, Pennsylvania, where I was going to college, small college called Allegheny. It was a Christian Missionary Alliance church. And I don't remember the subject. I just remember when I left there, what was that? Because it was so good. He dissected the Bible in a way I had never heard before, and it just ignited something in me, and that took on a different chapter. So, yeah.
I love that. So you said it was your roommate that you had in college?
Mm-hmm.
Do you still talk to her? What's that relationship like? 'Cause that must have been kind of awkward at first.
It was awkward at first, and this is what's really cool about it. She was very, very strong in her faith, but her faith was being tested just as mine was growing. She was in a relationship where we both were in a relationship where we were being pressed to be outside of our comfort zones, and both of us were kind of just struggling to figure out what that looked like. I was in a CBS class a couple years ago where they asked to reach out to those people who were influential in your faith journey. And I reached out to her and found out, unfortunately, that she had passed away.
Oh, no.
And so I'll get to thank her.
Yeah.
But hopefully she knows. He says there's a great cloud of witnesses, and I'm just praying that she would know that. But yeah, it was awkward at first, but we ended on good terms. And I mean, that was just freshman year because we went in different paths. But I remember us both struggling at one point, and both of us still being able to talk to each other frankly and say, yeah, not comfortable with that. I'm not comfortable with that either. And her walking me through things as well as I walked her through things. So,
you mentioned when you were growing up that you felt different, and then also that the assumption was that everyone else lived that way too. I can definitely relate to a good part of that. What would you say to somebody who may still be feeling that way, even as an adult?
Wow, that's a really tough question because sometimes the perception is so hard to get above. It's so hard to move outside of, and I do think there is a point where you have to look beyond yourself. I kept thinking that everybody was like this. I remember asking my mother once, I said, why do people get married? I don't get it. Because if you get married for this, I'm confused. Because the outside world that I lived in was not much different. I lived in the inner city of Pittsburgh. Yay! And there were a lot of people on my street who had some pretty bad lifestyles. And it was just like, I just thought that was normal. And I think going to church, and my mother had a sense of stability that just didn't make sense. And I think that came from her growing up with my grandmother, who was a strong Christian, and my great-great-grandmother, who was also a very big part of our faith journey. And my mother would always, like, people would make fun of my skin color because I was a lot lighter than some of the African-American children in my neighborhood, and people would make fun of it, and they would call me, I don't even want to tell you what they called me, but she would say, no, just tell them you're Tahitian tan.
Tahitian tan.
She always put a positive spin on things, and I think in the midst of people's darkness, in the midst of their misperception, Jesus shows up pursuing them, even when you think he can't. And I don't know if you can do it on your own. I really don't attribute anything that I did. Looking back on it, I would have failed miserably if I had attempted to get above, because I did attempt to get above it. I'm going to leave this neighborhood. I'm going to go to a different school. I purposely went to Allegheny College because it was predominantly white. I went there because I had a funny feeling that the neighborhood that I grew up in wasn't like the rest of the world. There was one white student in my entire elementary school.
Oh, wow.
Okay, so when my parents divorced and we moved to the suburbs and I walked into the classroom, I had never seen that many white people in one place at one time. I was shocked. Yeah, so it was like, I wonder if the rest of the world is like this. It must be more white people. So, yeah, I changed that intentionally. My plans for what I was going to do in life weren't even close to what God had planned. So he stepped in. And the cool thing is, you can't mess up his plans.
Say that again.
Yeah.
You
for
can't
real.
mess up his plans. Read Samson
Yeah.
in Judges.
Yeah.
There's no book named Samson.
The book, you guys.
That's that book that Denise really liked. You know that book? She says to check it out from the
There's
library.
a lot of good things in there. A lot of good things. It's interesting that you say that because we think that we have things the way they should go and what success looks like and how to get there. And we have this list, and then God just is like, oh, actually, no, just kidding. Like, this is what you're going to end up doing. That has to feel a little confusing at times, a little entertaining at times. Can you walk us through that a little bit? How did you end up in these roles that you are now in? And what was that like? What was that conversation with God like throughout that?
Oh, golly. These are tough ones because
Sorry.
I guess that's why they call it Prodigal Peas. I don't know. But anyway, I felt like because of the background that I had and the misogyny that was oppressed on me from my dad, I made some terrible vows. I would never need a man. I would never depend on a man. And I had no intention of ever being in a long-term relationship with one either until I figured out that God was like, that's not really how that goes. And I was like, okay, whatever. I married this guy that I really had a crush on. I thought he was really cute, and I just liked him a lot. And the reason I married him is because I felt like he treated me like Jesus. He just loved me no matter what. When I was mean, when I was happy, I was sad, I was fat, skinny, whatever, ugly, in between. He just didn't care. He just really liked Richele a lot. So I was like, this could work. I had a misconception of what marriage looked like. I thought the Christian wife was supposed to be a stereotypical, basically domesticated sideboard. Whenever he needed advice, I'd be there for him. And by the second child, that went out the window. So it was like, I can't be getting up in the morning making you breakfast before you go to work. That's not going to happen anymore. So I think it was a lot of maturing, particularly because I did not have a good role model of marriage in my family, in my history, and just being surrounded by a solid group of women throughout my life. I joined a prayer team that was at CFC, and I came to CFC about 40 years ago. And I came because I was working, and this is before I was married, and I was looking for a church. And let me tell you, I went to some very interesting establishments in the Northern Virginia area. And a woman at work said, you should try this church, because I'm really into the arts, by the way. I love ballet, the arts, the whole 9 yards. And she said, they really do a good Christmas musical. And I came to the first Christmas musical, and I never left.
Aww.
That was in 1981, I think, somewhere around there. But I hadn't married my husband yet. And then when we did get married and I started going, I joined a prayer group, then I joined CBS. I was a core leader in the children's program for the CBS, and just was surrounded by some really, really strong Christians who kept me in the Word, kept pointing me back to Jesus. I think that was instrumental. I also had some really good friends. My grandmother, my mother were also very instrumental. As you know, living in Northern Virginia is not the easiest financial situation, and trying to be a stay-at-home mom and with only one income was just getting a little stressful. And I remember praying and asking God, I really, really, really want to do something for the kingdom, but it would be nice if I got paid for it. And I figured out our budget. It would be good if I made this much money a year. And it was weird because I kept praying, and they started this thing at the church called the bus ministry, and I showed up to help. And I said, look, I'm just going to help on the weekends, do this. And then God was like, no, you're going to do whatever they ask you to do. And I went, okay. So I was like, so then I ended up leading this children's group. And then they came to me after about 6 months and said, we really wanted somebody who was more fun-oriented, games-oriented. You're kind of, pushing the Bible. And I said, that is correct. And I said, you definitely have the wrong girl if you want more fun. So thank you, but I'm moving on. And as I was walking out, God said, you're not done. You're going to go back and you're going to ask them to find out whatever they need help with, and you're going to show up every week to help. And I went, okay. So I did. And it was about 2 or 3 weeks after someone else was running the program, Pastor James Allman showed up in my driveway and said, I need you to come back and run this kids ministry, and I'm going to pay you this much money. And it was the exact amount that I had prayed for.
Of course it was.
And he said, and you don't even have to leave home. You can do all your work from home, show up on the... And I was like, oh.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
that's how I started. And I moved from bus ministry because I used to work, I started in the nursery, but I didn't take money for that, didn't need it at the time. Well, I don't know what I was thinking, but anyway. I went from bus ministry to children's ministry, from children's ministry to Zone 56, which was the tween ministry there, from there to middle school, from middle school to student ministries, and to where I am now, family ministries.
Yeah, so Richele oversees family ministry, which is kids all the way from 0 to end of high school. She oversees all of those programs and all of the people who run those individual programs. And she's very intuitive about what her people need and how to best help them and how to support them. And it was amazing to work for her. It didn't feel like we were working for her. It felt like we were working with her. And so I just can't say enough about Richele Walker and the influence and the effect that she has on Christian Fellowship Church. It's incredible.
That was very kind words.
That's all true.
Thank you for sharing all of that, first and foremost.
You're welcome.
Working with all these different age groups, I know that in the ministries that I serve in, I have found that I have learned more through the people that I'm serving more than anything. So in the time that you've been doing this, what are some things that you've learned from those you're serving? Or where have you noticed your own spiritual growth?
I believe the greatest thing is that it's something Brooke said, is I don't look at people who might report to me officially as my subordinates. I work with them. Mm-hmm. I will introduce them as the people that I work with, because if I take on the attitude that they have nothing to teach me or that I have nothing to receive from them, it's pointless for me doing it. I'm not serving. I'm self-serving at that point. I think the biggest thing is that what Brooke said is that I love looking into people's giftings and just figuring out, oh, you would shine at this. It's like when Brooke said she was going to go into counseling, and I was like, yes, you are. Because that, I think, is my greatest gift, is just being able to look at somebody and say, oh, I know where you're going to shine. Is it always that front forward? In some people, God has put people in my path that I thought, I'm not seeing it, Lord. And he's always telling me, say, you'll see it. Just, you are going to love on this person. Okay.
From all the different age groups, have you noticed particular themes or struggles that are worth maybe just mentioning? And
it is very interesting that you say that, because I think it was when I was in Zone 56, which was the tween ministry for 5th and 6th graders, I began to see an incredible downward spiral of maturity in children. And what I mean by that, children, of course, are not really mature, but the level of maturity was just getting wacky, particularly among 5th and 6th graders, that 6th grade level where you started to see a little bit more of the adolescence show up and a little bit more of the mature questioning. It was going downward. It was almost as if they were going backwards. I believe it has a lot to do with technology. I believe that the lack of relational conversation took its toll on social graces, manners, a whole bunch of things. I remember just as a parent, we have 4 children. They're all grown now. I have 2 beautiful grandchildren. But as a parent, I struggled with the biggest issue was creation, constantly fighting the battle with my children about evolution and creation and pointing it back to the Bible. It's totally switched. I think about 5 or 6 years ago, it switched to sexual identity and sexuality, just struggling for people to understand that. I really don't know where it is now, because I see such a struggle with parents, and it's not like they're not trying. I've seen just a lack of respect for elders, a lack of respect for positions. One of my pet peeves is when children do not know how to behave appropriately for the situation or the location. You don't act the same as you do in church as you do at the playground. I used to tell my children that all the time. Outside voices, inside voices, they make a difference. But I do believe there is a huge factor in the amount of information that children have to process today. The amount of things that are thrown at them through school, through the internet, through everything. There are so many influences. It's a daunting task, but you can handle it with Jesus. It's just, you have to keep that mantra, though. You cannot do this by yourself. It really does take a village, and it also takes kindness. I was not always this nice. In fact, I don't consider myself a nice person because I'm very orderly, and things got to go like this. And if they don't go like that, I'm usually very, I would say probably about 5 or 6 years ago, I was like, well, too bad, too sad. I'm so sorry. I am not like that anymore. I try hard, but you've got to show grace. And I think parents today have such a hard job to trying to raise up children in the way they should go. It sounds simple that you could just pick up the Bible. I've heard people say it's like an instruction manual. It is not. It is a Bible that will point you to Jesus, and that is your job as a parent. Point your children to Jesus, get them close to Jesus, keep them close to Jesus, and you do the same. Yeah, it doesn't always go perfectly well, but that's the thing I always tell people. It's not about making sure your kid's in the best school, making sure that all goes along with it. The number one thing is to get your kid in a relationship with Christ, and you model that. And it doesn't matter what age. You start young, and it's never too late to start.
I agree.
Yep.
I remember hearing an episode with Brian and John. Hi, guys. Where Brian said the goal is not for your kids to be independent, but to be God-dependent. And that just really spoke to me because it's very counter to what society really
Absolutely
pushes.
it is. Yep.
And it's the one thing that could just save so much heartache and hurt and possibly a ton of mistakes along the way. Since you are now overseeing all these different age groups that have their own leaders.
Because there's a college student ministry starting now, too.
Just
isn't
started.
there? Yes.
That is a God thing. That is,
That's awesome.
it is such a God thing, because it was always something on the back burner for me. Didn't think that we would be able to pull it off because we're not a college town.
Yeah.
But I am going to attribute something to that nasty COVID virus, because one of the things that COVID did was create a network of digital community, and that eliminates the demand or command to have a college right here. Plus, you do have a lot more students who are sticking around. I'm real excited about that.
Awesome. We're
Yes.
excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, me too.
But where I was going to go is one thing that used to hold me back many, many years ago, and a lot of things held me back many years ago, but this one in particular was I was always afraid to get involved at church because I was worried that I was going to see where personalities start clashing, and then that my one thing that I love so much about coming to church and feeling so happy and fulfilled is going to be tarnished because of personalities clashing. What's the word I'm looking for?
Messiness of relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, God, I don't want to get involved. I'm involved in a lot of things now. But
A bit.
but my question is, as you're overseeing, what does that look like from your perspective? You've had a lot of people in and out working. Has it been your experience that actually it has been lovely and everyone just has been getting along so well, and praise God for making it all work into this nice woven little blanket? Or if not, what are some things that you've learned along the way?
Oh,
that
we've had
might be worth
bumps.
discussing?
We've had bumps along the way because we're human. I do think, though, that as a leader, I have to take the responsibility that it's my job to make that work. If there is a conflict, if I'm at the root of it, I need to do something about it. Conflict resolution to me has to be one of the greatest skills in leadership, because you're going to have it. We're human. This thing called sin messed up everything. Us committing the sin messed it up. So it's one of those situations where things are just not going to go swimmingly. I have had to, in time, step back and go, okay, was that right for me to step in like that? And I had something just the other day that came up that I heard somebody discussing, and I was like, nope, we are not going to do that. And sometimes it's that simple. Sometimes it's, let me hear your side of it, and then we'll move on. But most of the time, I'm telling you, though, we have a great team. I've always had a great team, and I've just been blessed. I would say part of that is just prayer in how we hired people as well. I don't take credit for that either. We've had some blips along the way, and I don't consider that a failure. I consider that part of the learning process. And I just pray that, whatever the mistakes or the bumps along the way, they're just part of people's journeys too. I've had some really interesting challenges as far as my role sometimes, and just the fact that I could sit back on a personal human level and say, boy, I messed that up. So there have been some things that it just didn't turn out the way I planned it, but they've been good.
See, this is one of the best people I've ever worked with. She's just incredible.
Brooke, I have more questions.
Okay, keep going. I just wanted to say that because obviously.
So some of our listeners are newer to faith and maybe have not fully grasped a close, intimate relationship with God. You now have a very close personal relationship with God, and you, especially in this ministry and what you've been called to, that shows up in just about every decision-making step. Can you elaborate more on what that looks like to someone who's never stepped into that kind of a space?
You mentioned before about a relationship of not independence, but interdependence on God, dependence on God. And I think, I don't care where you are in your relationship with Christ, you have to get to the level where it becomes total and complete surrender. And I would say that I probably thought I was there about 15 years ago, and I wasn't. I was pragmatic and dogmatic, so to speak, about like, oh, I got to read my Bible, I got to do this, I got to do that, and not leaving enough room for the Holy Spirit. And I think that is hard to try to figure out, okay, how's this triune thing work? I don't think anybody who's new to the faith should feel they need to throw their training wheels out the window. You're not going to get on the bike and just ride away. It's not that simple. And that's why community is so important. You need people at different levels of faith and different levels of faith maturity to walk you through it. I thought it was really like you just read the Bible. And then when I started reading the Bible and I heard people dissecting it, it's like you got to study the Bible. Okay, so that's different. And then you got to throw children in there on top of it, and you got to be this, and you got to be that, and you got to do it all like, okay, Jesus, am I doing it okay? And it's not really so much of a test, like, oh, you failed that one. Yeah, I failed at a lot of things, but he doesn't look at my failures, he looks at me. And it's hard when you don't know what a good relationship looks like. If you not had a model of a good relationship from a parent or a sibling, it is difficult to look at a relationship with Jesus, this person you cannot see, and then throw God in there and the Holy Spirit, and you're like, okay, what do I do with all of this? And I think sometimes it's a complete, I don't know what to do with this, but I know someone who does. So a constant, this is one thing that I've got from my sister-in-law who would repeat this to me, you cannot store up manna. You must go back every day. It is a daily thing. There are things on your list that you do every day. Hopefully you shower, brush your teeth, and do all that other stuff you got to do.
Hopefully, guys.
Yeah. The walk with Christ has to be the same. It's a daily check-in.
Amen.
So I'm going to not talk about my relationship with you just quite yet, but to say that you have had an influence on people is quite the understatement. And you probably, just by the look on your face, for those that aren't watching or just listening, you should see her face right now. You probably don't realize the effect that you have had on so many people, or the different ways that you've had an effect on people. And so how does that, knowing, because you do know to some extent that you have had an influence on others. So knowing that that is part of not just your position, but you as how God designed you, knowing that, how has that shaped you? How has that affected you?
It's humbling. It is very humbling. I can only hope that it would be a positive influence. I think that at some point in time when you know you have influence, you have to, as a Christian, step back and say, okay, less of me, more of you. Because if you want to influence someone to the point where I don't want to make little Richelles, I want to make people go to Jesus. Mm-hmm. So the influence has to be like, do you understand that this has to go to him? I can point you in the right direction, but if you're doing this for other reasons, it will fail. It will not have the fruit that it could have. So I think the influence comes back to a constant reminder to me to stay under the influence of him. Mm-hmm. Because if I don't, I'm creating human flesh stuff that there's no good into that. There really isn't. And I just feel like it's hard, though, sometimes because you're tempted. And when you grow up with a background like I do, you want to fix stuff. Right. You want to make sure everybody's happy and things are done right and there's nothing left out. And it took me years to get to the point where I would say, I'm not the fixer. I'm the conduit, and I'm not even going to try to fix it. And it's really difficult when you have grown children to not just want to hurt somebody.
When you had said, the idea of more of God, more of you, Lord, less of me. The way that I heard somebody say it one time was more of you in more of me. Mm-hmm. I give you more access to more of me, God. And I feel like that's one of the things that's how you live. And because that's how you relate to God, and that's just what then comes out of you in any connections and relationships that you have with other people. And it was fun to hear somebody else say it that way, but to watch you live your life that way and then be affected by that.
Wow. Took me years to get there, though, because, again, I thought it was checking boxes, not recognizing the level of submission and surrender, but also the freedom in that there was, oh, I can really be me. Yeah. I don't have to pretend to be something. I don't have to try to be someone else. Very difficult to get past the point, well, they may not like me, they may not approve of me, they may not want to hear what I have to say. And I've had some interesting encounters like that, but for the most part, it's been difficult for me to understand when somebody is not all in. That's probably my biggest, but I do know that sometimes it takes a while to get there, and it's not me to judge when somebody can get all in. Yeah.
Well, speaking of influence, Brooke, why don't you tell us a little bit about how Richele's influenced you?
Oh my goodness. When she said that, when I came to her and talked about how I was feeling a shift out of student ministry into coaching and counseling, I didn't think it was going to be a negative reaction, but at the same time, I'm essentially telling this person that I work with and for that I'm leaving. And so that's never a fun conversation. But I told her so early on because I have tremendous respect for her, and I wanted to make sure that she had time to do all the things on the side of the church that you needed to do to find a replacement and hire people and do all of that. But I told her early on also because she's always been in my corner, but I needed her in my corner on this one because I loved doing student ministry, but it was undeniable that God was moving me, and that was scary. And I didn't want to leave, but at the same time, I did want to leave because I could tell this was where I was going. And that's one of the things that really stands out a lot to me. It was 100% support and encouragement all the time. When I was in the student ministry position, I could come to you with anything that was job-related, anything that was personal life. I cried in your office, I don't know how many times, about things going on in my life. I felt like I was working with an amazing friend, and you don't often get that kind of an experience at a job. And so to have that and to then continue a friendship with you, because it didn't end because I stepped away from a position.
Well, you weren't
at this
getting
church.
rid of me.
But it's like I said, the way that I watch you live your life with God has an effect on how I relate to God. I know that you say, and I love it about you, that we worked with you. It wasn't that we worked for you, but you were still in an authority position. And the way that you operated in a position of authority was never authoritative. It was shepherding. It was servant leader. It was, you modeled Jesus all the time. And even when you were like, I'm not a very nice person. Oh, yes, you are. But you had your flip the table moments too, like Jesus did. But like, that's the thing. I saw all of the aspects of healthy leadership in you. And one of the things I really loved about you too is that you were perfectly okay with your flaws as well. You didn't think too highly of yourself, and you didn't think too low of yourself. You took everything to God, and that's how you modeled leadership, that's how you modeled ministry, that's how you modeled just your life to all of us who were in your circle. And I could go on and on and on, but those are some of the highlights of working with Shelley Flo. Sorry, one more thing. And it's continuing still. It didn't end when I left my position at Christian Fellowship Church, but she would come in some days with a bag of clothes, and she would say, and it was kind of funny, she'd be a little irritated, but not really, and she'd be like, here, I was in my closet and I pulled this out and I was gonna wear it, and God said, nope, that's Brooke's. And she's like, and I would say, no, I don't want to give it to Brooke. And he'd be like, well, that's Brooke's. She's like, so here, this is all the stuff that God said is yours. And let me tell you, everything, this dress, you can't tell it's a dress, but this is a dress that I'm wearing. Everything she has given me fits me perfectly. It's for my body type, it's my colors. And then people they'll say, hey, I like your top that you're wearing, or I like your dress, or whatever it is. And I'll say, oh, thank you so much. I got it from my favorite boutique. Have you ever heard of it? It's called Richele's Closet. And sometimes people don't know, where is that? And I'm at Richele Walker's house. And they're like, oh. Best hand-me-downs ever. I just had to throw that in there, too, because that's one of my favorite things about Richele. And still, John will come home and say, hey, Richele gave me this bag of clothes for you.
He still does it. He still does it. And the bad part is I'll hold something up and I'll go, oh, gosh, yeah, it's hers. Yeah, it just has your name on it. Yeah, okay, I'll give it up. I don't mind, honestly. Fine. Yeah, that works for me. Yeah. I think it's important, though, that you realize that iron sharpens iron, that you taught me the meaning of grace, and I don't think you knew that.
No.
Because it did not come easy for me to accept my flaws. You walked me through that. In fact, you were instrumental. I'm going to lose it here. But very difficult for one of my children who struggles with his self-esteem to accept himself as he is. And I realized that part of my parenting, even parenting adults, that I still needed to grow. And I had not accepted my own flaws. I kept looking at them as causation of sin, something that I had done that I needed to fix, I needed to work on, I needed to make this better, I needed to do this better. And accepting my flaws and saying, okay, Jesus, this is not good. I'm going to lay it at your feet, and you're going to walk me through this. And the fact that he still embraces me through those flaws and says, oh, yeah, that's just where I want you. and it didn't always come that way. I always looked at it as some chore that I had to fix. And I don't think there is a person who has ever worked for or with me that I haven't learned something from. I have, oh, Lord, the personalities on my team. And they have always been like that. I don't have two people that are alike, not one. And they have taught me so much in how to love like Jesus. It's that simple. You really need to learn to love like Jesus. It's not always easy, but it's been good. It's been good. I don't look at it as I'm still learning, but I am still learning.
Well, and that kid of yours that you were talking about, love him to no end. He's just an incredible person.
I know.
Yeah.
He just needs to know that. They all are, to be honest, but yeah. He particularly struggles.
I think our kids, as if I have them, I say that because I see it. Our first examples are our parents. And so sometimes when our parents go through some kind of healing or work in that process, learning to accept flaws, that then becomes a testimony to them.
Absolutely, 100%.
That they can start walking into.
Absolutely. I learned one of the greatest gifts I could do for my children is to tell them I'm sorry. I messed up. That's a big hurdle. When you get to that, and it's like you can't let them know. Absolutely, you have to let them know. I didn't handle this right.
What advice would you give to someone looking to step into leadership, whether it's ministry or somewhere else, as it relates to doing so from a godly perspective intentionally?
Oh, it has to start with prayer. It's a really interesting season I'm in my life. I'm not 20 anymore. I know. I don't even have children in their 20s anymore. That's really, yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
That in itself is, okay. I am praying about what's next in this season, and I have heard a couple of things. One is this season requires a new strategy. I have been going back to the Lord and asking him, okay, what's next? And it's like that. And it's like he gives me little snippets here and there, and I'm like, okay, can I have a little more? No. So it's clearly this morning I was praying, and it was like I literally said, so I'm just not ready yet. And he was like, no, you're not. He said, but you will be. And the funny thing is that I think anybody going into leadership must consider themselves as Jesus considered himself a leader. I came not to be served, but to serve. And that, I think, is the beginning. You cannot go in like, I'm in charge, I got to dictate, I'm the big man on campus, big woman on campus. Any of that just doesn't work. There's a thin line, though, of how much you have to look at your authority and say, okay, I had a discussion with somebody right before I came over, and they were saying, well, I need to check with this person, that person. I said, you just check with the person you needed to check to. I'm not going through 50 hoops to do this. Okay, so if there is a problem, just tell them to come see me. Do I like saying that all the time? No, because half the time there is a problem, and they do come back to see me. But it's just the idea that you have to know the balance, and there is no balance on this earth. You need to get yourself ready for that. You're not going to get to this point where if I just get this done, if I just have this degree, if I just have that, there is always going to be a next level, a next step, a next phase. I think in leadership, the greatest gift you can give anybody is just simple humility, remembering that the true leader is Jesus Christ. You are not the leader. You are not the judge. You are not the final word. You are a conduit and ambassador for Christ. You got to answer to him.
What does discipleship look like for those that you work with? Is there something separate that happens, just occasional conversation that might come up, or?
It's different for every person. It's a lot like parenting. You can't parent a child like you parent another child. You can't disciple a person. There are some people that I wish I had more one-on-one time with because I think they would benefit from it. But God has not given me that opportunity. When I see opportunities to disciple in a certain way, some are harder than others. It's very difficult when you work with mature Christians. And a lot of times, the problem when you have the gift of discernment is that you know what the problem is, but God is like, I didn't ask you to fix that. And he doesn't smack me, but he will remind me. And I did have a very good friend of mine years ago told me that the number one responsibility of a person who has the gift of discernment is intercessory prayer. So prayer is paramount for discipling. You cannot disciple without prayer. Prayer for yourself, prayer for the person. I've often had conversations that I know are going to be difficult. I had a really tough meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I thought, this is not going to go well. And I prayed myself up to the point that a meeting that I thought was going to last a good half an hour, 45 minutes, I came in and I said, hey, here's the deal. What a great idea. And I was like, okay. And I'm throwing what I call a Nehemiah prayer where you kind of shoot it up. And it's like, okay, Lord, am I doing good? He's like, just be quiet. Okay. Meeting was over in 5 minutes. Couldn't have gone better. And it was like,
All right.
okay. Yeah, and prayer has to come in there. It has to. Yeah.
I agree. You have given Sunday sermons here before.
Thank you, Brian Bells. I appreciate that.
Was that your first time when you had done it? Was that your first time doing a
Speaking
sermon
on
ever?
a Sunday morning service, God's got this new thing where he talks to me while I'm cleaning the kitchen, which I'm really not sure why, but it works. So I guess that's why. But I was cleaning off the counters, and he said, do you realize you're first? And I was like, my first? What are you talking about? He said, you were the first woman to give a sermon at this church on a Sunday morning. You were the first woman to lead communion at this church at a Sunday service. And I was like, that's a privilege and an honor I never saw coming my way. I don't take it lightly. I'm very grateful, very grateful.
A pioneer.
Trailblazer.
Yes. Amen.
Indeed.
So what's it like being a spiritual leader at home? What does that look like?
It can get difficult because the husband is supposed to be the spiritual leader, and I don't get ahead of my husband. He is the most introverted person you ever wanted to meet. He is a man of few words, but he is also an incredible leader. And I probably learned the humility from him more than anything else. We've been married for 42 years.
All right.
And it's because of communication. We talk. And it's not me. That's what's the hilarious part. He can pick up in 2 seconds if there is something off or bothering me. And he will, what happened? What went on? And I was like, no, I'm fine. No, you're not. And he is persistent about talking. Just the other day, having discussions about our grown children and things that we would like to do, things that we would like to see, and just really, really phenomenal to have a person that you're on the same plane with that probably, I don't know if we were ever off sorts in how we managed things. In fact, my daughter's probably still standing upright because of her dad. Her teenage years were quite difficult, and he literally would get between the two of us. It's really interesting that you say that, though, because we went on a retreat together out in Colorado, and it was really kind of funny because you had all these guy pastors there, and people were asking them questions, and they were, asking them questions about, so what's your church like? What do you do in your church? And Daryl would just go, point to me. So he knows when to abdicate, but he also knows when to step in. So it's a mutual. I never felt like a doormat, never felt like I didn't have a voice. We worked that out because part of that was just me thinking, I need to be the role model Christian wife. And he's like, sure. That works for me. And then it was like, well, it's not working because my perception was a little off. Yeah, so that's not the model that I wanted to set for my daughter.
Sounds like you guys were able to figure out pretty quickly what it meant to be a solid team. Like you said, you threw the stereotypes out and figured out what made sense and what worked really well for the two of you.
We did. It's kind of funny because my brother called me one time and he said, you guys are always so in sync. And I said, yeah, in front of you. I was like, yeah, we're not always in sync. It comes from, I'm telling you, it's communication is the key. And it's open communication. And it's also honest communication. If something is bothering me, I'm not just going to say, oh, yeah, okay, let's do that. No. If there's a different side to it, and if something is just off, we got to talk it out. So it's just a different, I tell you, this grandparenting thing, though, so much fun. Oh, my gosh. We had them almost all day yesterday because my daughter had some appointments, and it was just, they are just, yeah, perfect? No. Joy? Yes. I got that grandparent thing down. Best job I've ever had. Yeah.
Have you had the experience where you feel unseen or misunderstood or stretched thin? Can you speak a little on those and how you work through that?
Yeah. I've had that numerous times. This is a male-dominated field. It's that simple. You talked about women speaking in the service, and I feel like there are a lot of people who have served to put women in the place that they should be in. But I don't think sometimes people really realize the way that you may not even be considered for something. It's just that there are times when you feel like, and it goes back to the prayer, is this my role? Is this not my role? And it's difficult in ministry because they don't just go straight and narrow. They bleed into each other. We're all working on the same team for the same coach, for the same manager, for the same goal, for the same victory. And then if somebody does something that gets a little out of line, that may not be your role to put that person back in line. It may be someone else's. I know there were people who were not comfortable when I spoke. Mm-hmm. It took a lot of prayer even that very morning for me to walk out the door the first time I did it, because it was like, I don't think I can do this. I know you can relate. I don't think I can do this. I don't know if I'm even supposed to do that. And it took almost a lightning bolt from God to say, oh, it's not just you are going to do this, you are supposed to do this. It wasn't something that was debatable. But on the other side of it, you have to check your brokenness when you feel like you're not being seen. I had something happen earlier this week where I felt like, okay, strange thing. It's a different season in my life. What comes next? And I was at home going through the mail, which I'm terrible about going through the mail. And there was a card in there from a very dear friend of mine, and I opened the card, and she said, I was just praying for you this morning. God told me to send you a card, and I was waiting for this great big message for him to say some verse or something, and this is what he told me to tell you. Tell her I love her. Just what I needed to hear.
Yeah.
Because he's like, I don't care who doesn't see you, I see you. Yeah. And, yeah, by the way, they saw you too. Sometimes you just have to recognize that, okay, is there a time to speak up? And I've struggled with that. When do you speak up? When do you don't speak up? As a woman of color in a male-dominated industry, when do you speak up? When do you need to speak up? When do you be silent? And it's not always the same answer.
To stay on that same topic of when you were teaching that morning, what would you say to some of the women who were maybe feeling uneasy about that too? They're really encouraged to see you on there, but at the same time now they're wrestling with, well, I thought we weren't supposed to. What would you say to them?
It's a personal decision. It was a difficult time once when Daryl and I were praying about me staying at home and whether I worked outside of the home. And I had to make a decision as to how I was going to go about whether he wanted me to collect unemployment and I wanted to not work out of the home. And I was struggling with, okay, what's my role here? I need to submit to my husband. And one, I sought counsel from someone that I respected and understood that they were going to give me a good, honest answer. So I think that's important, that you don't just make the decision on your own. It needs to be a joint effort. You need to be in union with somebody else. Sometimes people think it's so black and white in the Bible, and it may not be. I don't have a problem with people who said that I don't think she should have been up there. If that's how you feel about it, that's fine. I'm not going to argue with you. I have to be obedient to what God said to me to do. And I think that's where the difference comes. I was not going to Brian Bell saying, I need to preach. That wasn't going to happen then. It ain't going to happen now. Yeah. I don't feel that urgency. But on the other side of it, give me a platform. I'm going to tell you about Jesus. I'm going to tell you what he's done in my life. I'm going to tell you what his word says. That, to me, is the difference. It's not about, okay, I got to make sure I'm following exactly. Of course you have to go by the book. But going by the book sometimes means, okay, I read what it says. Now what do you have to say to me directly? Because Jesus will speak to you. If he could speak to women way back then, he will speak to us now. He hasn't stopped talking.
So I don't really want to end our conversation, but we do have to wrap up our conversation.
Okay.
So maybe what we'll do is we'll have you back for another conversation sometime,
okay.
And you can do podcast number 2.
Okay.
Great. I love that.
I'm fine with that.
Thank you so much for coming on our podcast. And
it was a privilege.
Sharing all of your life with us.
Yes.
And I know stories from your life, and so there is more to hear, and I really do think we need to just have her back again. But hopefully there was something in this episode that was encouraging to you, and if you want to let us know that, so then we can pass it on to Richele, you can email us at prodigalpeas@gmail.com, or just leave a comment, however you want to get in touch with us. That would be great. We would love to hear from you. And thanks for tuning in again to another episode of Prodigal Peas in a Pod. She's Denise, I'm Brooke, Shelley Flo. It's been a blast. We'll see you next week.
Okay, bye.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Prodigal Peas in a Pod.
For more content, please be sure to like, follow, and share.
And you can email us at prodigalpeas@gmail.com.
For more information on Misfit of Creation, you can like and follow me on just about all social medias, to include TikTok. I also have a Facebook community group that you can join. I have an Etsy shop that has a lot of downloadable tools to help strengthen your walk with Christ. There is a Patreon account if you are looking to be a monthly supporter. And I also do an online prayer call once a month. So be sure to follow that to be updated on when the next date is.
You can find more information on my mental and emotional health coaching practice at blueprintheartandmind.com, where you can also access my blog and schedule a session with me. And you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube. So, Denise, what's next?
Hey, DJ, spin that track.
I get it now, I need to be myself because a copycat can only do so well. In love with everything that makes me who I am. Don't need a backup plan, I hope they understand that I'm doing better today. I got me a mission, I got some fruition, you down to stay out the way. Can't seek validation from people who hating, I got my mentality straight. Shout out to God, I've been keeping the first, he been working and paving the way.